So let's just make a box. So click, drag, release, click again. Okay, we've got a box. Now you notice by default, you're just like, well, I can't move the box, can't do anything. That's because, so this is a default, what do we call this jazz? It's just like the non-moving icon. This is just your default. So you can see here, right? So this is your gizmo. That's what they call this little fella in the middle here. So this is your actual point of interest for the object. So as I say, this is just your default gizmo. So this is the one where you can't move anything with it, and it's actually quite useful when you're modeling, and I'll go over that later, but that's your default. So to bring up your default, you press the Q key. That's what it'll be to start with, but Q key to bring up this. So this is your non-moving gizmo. So very useful later on, which I'll get into. But to actually move the box itself, you just press the W key. Now you've got this one, so your gizmo changes. So this is your movement gizmo. So it's quite simple. So if you move your mouse over a certain axis, you can see that it goes yellow. So let's just say you want to move it on the y-axis, you move it over, the arrow is highlighted yellow, then you just move. And that'll move the box on the y-axis. Same with the z, and same with the x, and same with the z. So that's just your basic movement, so that's useful. What is really useful with the gizmo though is if you move your mouse in this point of the square, you can see that it actually activates the X and the Y axis at the same time. So if you move, you'll be moving on those two axes, or axes. So this is where, like, I find it's very useful moving around like this. It'll make sense like as you get more into it. And then you can do it on the ZX axis. You can go up like that, or you can go the other axis here. So like, let's just say you're building like a level or something. There's like a platform up there. Like this cube's in line, but you just need to move it up to the top of the platform over there. You just go grab it there and you'd move it up, kind of thing. So it's a really useful way to navigate it. It's a little bit confusing to sort of get your head around, but it makes sense as you go. But for the time being, like, you know, if you're just beginning out, just, you know, move by the arrows and you sort of get an idea of the space itself. Because yeah, it is kind of tricky because like there's nothing else really like 3D, you know. So you're just like, brain might not be used to any of this sort of stuff, and this is basic, you know. But anyway, that's how you move your objects around the actual scene itself, which is critical. Now what you'll see down here, these three little windows here, this is absolutely critical. Okay, so these three windows here are absolutely critical windows. You'll be using these tons. So what these do is these show you the value of where your object is located in 3D space. So these values are set to centimeters by default. I'll show you that later on, how to set values. Yeah, I'll show you that later on. But either way, so these are your your axis values. So as you can see, the y-axis, for example, is sitting at 3.9. If we want to change it, we go 5, and that moves it into the 5. So this is very useful though, because if it defaults everything back to 0 if you right click on these arrows. So as you can see, each one of these got an arrow. So if we right click on Z, brings it back down to 0. So that is the default that this is set to. Now these little arrows are across the board. So let's just say, you can see them everywhere, man, little arrows everywhere. But this is very useful, man, just the right click, you know. So like, let's just say we've got 4 of these set up and we only want the default one. You just right click on the arrows and that brings it back to the default. Very simple. But that's just something that you'll be using tons. You'll be in this little window here all the time, man. Which is good because like if you want to center your object, you're just like, oh well, I'll just put everything right click you, and we're boof back in the middle, you know. So it's a very useful way of navigating, you know, and it's an accurate way. So if you're doing architectural stuff, you need to move stuff, you know, 1.5 meters and whatever, you can do it all through here. So that's very, very useful. So that's your main movement. Now we'll get into scaling. So if you press the E key, that brings up the scale gizmo. Now I've also got mine set to S because of Adobe Illustrator. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So this is your scale gizmo. So this is your scale operations in the viewport. So again, it acts just like the other one. So like your movement. So you can do it all uniform, do it like that, and that scales everything up in one hit. You can do it on this axis, and that flattens it out a bit. You can do it on the Z. So this is where it's a little bit different, because you've got, like, that gizmo represents the two, but if you just want to do one axis, instead of having your arrows, you just do it like that. So that's visually pretty well represented. The actual triangle itself kind of squishes or, you know, distorts to the axis that you're using. That makes sense. So that's another way. The scale, you'll be using tons. Very, very useful tool. And there's a few different scale modes as well. So this is where we'll get a bit more into it. So what I've just shown you, the defaults, the movement and the scale corresponding Q, W, E, these are all available up here. So this is the actual key itself for those keys. So select the move, as I said, which was your W, then that highlights this up here, and scale. Now you can see here that there's a few different modes. So there's 3 different actual modes to scale. You've got your standard, and you've got a squishy one, and the other one I can't remember. No, select and squish and non-uniform. So what you would notice, because occasionally with scaling, this always threw me off when I started, because each different mode. So let's just go through non-uniform. So that scales it non-uniformly. It's a bit bizarre. I don't really use that much. Then you got your squishy one, which is kind of cool, so it kind of squishes it right out. As I said, like, I mean, those scales, you know, they're a bit more experimental. If you know, really warping shapes and all that, they're kind of cool. But I generally just keep it to the default. But what you can see though, if you have a look at the actual mouse cursor, so it's in the squishy mode at the moment, and the mouse cursor indicates that. So if you just press the E key again, that changes it. So this is your uniform, then that'll be the squishy one. So that's just something to be aware of, because you might be working, you might want to go to scale it normally, and then you're just like, whoops, I accidentally squished it. So if that's happening, it just means that you're in the wrong mode up here. So just scrolling through the E until you get to the main one here, which you'll be using the most. So that's just how the scaling works. So very simple, and there's scaling. I said you'll be using tons of scaling, man. So that's why it's on the E key. You know, that's kind of like your hot spot on the keyboard, the main ones. So let's move along. So now you've got the R key, which is your rotation. Makes nice and easy sense. So this is just how you rotate your actual object itself. So with rotation, there's angle snaps is something that you have to be aware of. So as you can see here, you see the degrees number. It's freeform. So there's no. It's just going at, you know, every single degree as you rotate. Now, so just with every other program, Control Z is your undo. That's why I'm just getting back to that position, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. No, but shit, let's Control Z, just in case you're wondering. But anyway, this is your angle snaps. So as I said, it's just going to a free form level, which, you know, can be useful, but you're going to want to be precise with certain things too. So to actually bring up the snaps, you just press, or to bring up the angle snap itself, press the A key. And what this does is it's snapping the angle to a certain value. So you can see it's just it's doing it in values of 5. That's what mine's set for. Now that's just to make it really accurate, right? So, well, what if you want to set your own values? Simple. So as you can see, this is your angle snaps toggle key. So when you press the A key, you can see that little window up the top there, active, inactive, active, inactive. And that's across the board. So, you know, as went over there, that'll tell you that you're in that screen. But if we want to change the angle snap value, just right click on this one. Now you've got your grid and snap setting windows, so you'll be seeing this one a bit. But right here we've got the angle, so mine was set to 5 degrees. So generally speaking, you know, you'll set your angles of divisions of 90 degrees. I like 5. I've just always used 5. It's just personal preference more than anything, you know. So, you know, 15 works good. You can go 22.5 and then 45 as well. But let's just say we change that to 15. Then we'll close this window. We'll come back into here, and now that's snapping at 15 degree angles, which is very useful. But I like 5, so I'll go back to 5. So that's just how you rotate your objects. And that's your basics of sort of navigation and rotation of your objects. So we'll conclude this first part and then we'll get into some more later on. Thank you very much.